everyone, and welcome. Welcome. My name is Kimberly Bryant, and I am the Director of Client Services at Coleman Insights. And here with me, I have consultants Jay Nachlis and Meghan Campbell. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Ask Me Anything, our webinar series where we answer your questions related to research, branding, and marketing strategy in audio entertainment. Today's AMA episode, we will be discussing personality and show research. We have already received some great questions that we are going to be answering today. However, if you have any follow-up questions or additional questions as we are discussing the topic, please feel free to use the chat feature and send your questions in. And if we have time at the end, we will try and address those. All right, let's get started. Jumping right in, I'm going to direct the start of the conversation, the first question to you, Meghan. Can you tell us what are some of the most important things you can learn from personality research, and how exactly do you arrive there?
We can learn a lot from personality research, and the sky is the limit, honestly. What exactly we can learn and how we get there is really determined by the types of research or methodologies that we decide to employ. Large-scale quantitative studies like our plan developers can provide a wealth of information, specifically a variety of performance measures, for your personalities, your competitors, really anyone in the market that might fall into the fold that your listeners might be interested in. And these performance measures can be broken down by age, gender, and other subsets of the sample. The measures can include familiarity, some sort of evaluation score using a rating scale, and you can also explore things like age relevance. Do younger listeners feel that the host or show appeals mostly to people older than them, or is it on target? There's also things like gender appeal. Does the audience perceive the show to be focused mainly on women or appealing to both men and women equally? We can explore many different angles in this type of research to determine whether the audience perceives a personality in the way that we or you expect them or want them to. Qualitative research allows us to explore the whys or uncover the whys. So we learn what the audience feels in our plan developer studies or in quantitative research. And then focus groups or online options like our Campfire online discussion groups can be used to dig into why they feel the way they do, what drives their listening behavior, why do they tune into one station or one personality versus the other, and what does the audience like and dislike about particular hosts or shows. And these can really allow us to probe into the details that can get a personality to the next level of performance. Contesting is another avenue we can use to explore personality research. Our media EKG content testing provides second-by-second evaluation of audio or video content, and the results can help determine what topics and features work for your hosts or show, how the audience reacts to their tone, how they react to them interacting with other listeners. And it can be really valuable in coaching talent because they can see the audience's evaluation line moving up and down as the audio plays, clearly showing areas of strengths and weakness.
Yeah. Well, follow-up question for you, Meghan. I know we received a question from Fred Ecoff, and he wants to know, what are some of the most important questions, like specific questions that you should ask?
Thanks for the question, Fred. I would say that the two biggest questions on our minds when we approach personality research is how familiar the audience is with the host or show, and then how the audience evaluates the host or show on a performance scale. We ask these two questions in almost all of our personality research, regardless of the methodology, just because it's so informative. Familiarity is important because it tells us whether a personality or show is cutting through. Do listeners notice them? Do they know they're there? Do they notice them enough to recognize their name? You know the host on your station intimately, but does the audience? So much of radio listening and even audio content consumption is passive, and it can take quite some time for an audience to become familiar with and recognize the host or show.
Yeah.
After you determine familiarity, asking those consumers who are familiar to rate them on a 4-point scale or a 5-point scale, however you want to do it. We use a 4-point scale: excellent, good, fair, and poor. And when we analyze these results, we really focus on the 2 poles. If somebody is rating a personality excellent, that means that they are really doing something that the audience notices, finds relevancy, connection with. And poor, there's doing something that's really making them tune out or not appreciate that host or show. So we use these types of personality evaluations in plan developers. And so that's the type of information that we can break down by age, gender, station listening, or habits. And you may go into one of these studies thinking that your morning show is aging out of the target demo and that you're using or losing younger listeners to someone across the street, only to find out that the opposite is true. And the data can be extremely valuable if you're able to trend it over time. So these are definitely the 2 most important questions that we use in personality evaluation.
Yeah, definitely. Jay, bringing it over to you, how long should you wait to include a new personality or a show in a study? I have a question here from Steve Reynolds. He says they just got a new morning show and wants to know if they should do a big promotional campaign for the next launch. What's the difference between testing a new personality versus a tenured show?
Yeah, and hi, Steve. The key to that question is new morning show. And the difference is, if you think about it, I'm going to say the answer generally is no, as far as doing a big promotional push for a new morning show, although there's some exceptions to the rule. For example, let's say that you're stealing the morning show from across the street and they're very familiar and you want to make a splash and make the point that they're now on your station. That would be an exception. Or maybe there's a show that used to be in the market. They left the market, they're coming back. You want to make a splash with that. Again, that's an exception to the rule. But let's assume, as Meghan pointed out, it takes a long time for personalities to become familiar. So let's assume, as it is in most cases, you launch a new morning show and the audience doesn't know them yet, right? And it takes time organically for them to become familiar. Marketing them on a large scale in a big promotional push is kind of wasting your money in the beginning, because think of it like mentally how you process marketing. If I see marketing for the radio station, for example, and it says the hit music station or #1 for hip hop and R&B, right? Or the sports leader, I get what that is. I like sports. I like hip hop. I'm going to listen to that radio station. If I have a marketing piece for Tony and Tina, who I've never heard of, and I don't have any relationship to them, why do I want to listen to them? It just plays differently until you develop a relationship with them. So the way that marketing for morning shows and personalities works best is when you're reinforcing something that they're already aware of. It's like Coke, right? I know Coke. I see marketing for Coke. Oh yeah, I thought of Coke. I want to drink a Coke. It's the same kind of thing. It's unaided awareness. It's keeping them top of mind. So generally speaking, you wait a while. You wait, generally we say at least a year, give them time to get familiar, and then evaluate whether or not you should do a big promotional campaign.
Yeah, definitely. Meghan, swinging it back to you, I have a question here from Travis Daly. What is the best way to truly measure likability of a talent?
That's a good question, Travis. I think that the evaluation scores I mentioned earlier are very helpful in determining likability. We would certainly expect a personality who's likable to have high excellent scores and low poor scores, but that's just one metric and it does not always tell the whole story. Likability often has to do with relatability and connection. So is the host someone listeners can imagine being friends with? Do they talk about subjects that are interesting to the audience and relevant to their lives? These types of questions can be answered quantitatively. We ask them through polls. We ask them through a series of agree-disagree questions from time to time. And they can also be explored qualitatively by analyzing open-ended responses to questions like, what do you like about the host? So I would suggest using evaluation scores along with additional questions about relatability and connection to answer whether a personality is truly likable. And also keep in mind that likability and being likable is not necessarily equal successful. We have certainly seen some personalities over the years who are extremely unlikable to a significant portion of the audience, but they're still considered a success and vice versa.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Jay, I have a great question from John Lipman. How much of this is unique to radio versus media like websites and social media?
That is a good question. Thank you, John. And I think it's interesting that the media he chose to ask about was websites and social media.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a couple of ways to tackle this question. One is to think of the question about how much of it is unique to radio and other media. If you're thinking about personalities and shows on a global level, and going back to Meghan's point about likability, whether you're on a radio station or podcast or a streaming channel and vice versa, it's not, there's probably not going to be a lot of difference whether or not that personality or show is likable, right? You're probably either going to like that show or you're really not going to like that show, or you're going to be indifferent about that show. However, there are probably different ways that show can be perceived depending on the type of show they're doing and the type of platform that they're on. And so, talking to podcast listeners specifically, or category listeners or radio listeners can give you some different answers, right? Now, here's where I would fold in the website and social media piece of this question, which I think is really interesting. So in content testing, sometimes we talk at Coleman about the 3 T's, which are topic, treatment, and tone. And so, you find out, what topics, for example, work best for a personality. What about the treatment of that particular topic? Whether they're doing an interview or a bit or a contest, right? And then the tone. Are they outrageous? Are they laid back? Are they serious, right? Those are the types of things you can really learn from content research about a personality, of what they're known for and also what they're expected to do by the audience, right? Now, that information can really inform the website and social media and that piece of the equation, right? How you promote that personality and show on the website can be informed by what you learn there, or how that personality engages on social media can be informed by what you learn about that. Because otherwise, if they're posting things that are kind of the antithesis of their brand or how the audience perceives of them, then it's out of sync. So there's a lot I think you can learn cross media, through research.
Definitely. All right. I have a question here from Steve Cassidy. Are there bits or features that should be buried forever that rub audiences the wrong way? Jay, why don't you answer that
one? Sure. Thank you for that question. Of course, the answer is yes. there's always going to be some, right? But that being said, I think it's important to first of all know that if you think the familiarity of your talent is, first of all, the familiarity of your talent in research is always going to be lower than you think it is. And that's especially the case with features. They're just not very familiar to the audience. You're only running them a certain amount of times. The way that TSL works, it's just they're not heard that much. And so when you think, it's just like music, gosh, we've played that song way too much. Have you? Because the audience may not think that's the case. Same thing for features. So whether something is played out or burned out, should you measure features that you run enough in research to find out how they do? Yes, absolutely you should, and find out whether or not it's evaluated well or poorly. And just like personalities, if they're evaluated poorly, then you probably shouldn't be running them. But otherwise, you should, just like personalities, give them time. If you feel, and kind of go through the criteria of, does it fit the brand? Is it advancing the show? Is it entertaining? And then stick with it and give it time if it works. And, whether or not it's played out, just make sure that you're not overreacting and going with your personal listening, which is always much higher than the average listener.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. That is all the time that we have today. Thank you, Jay and Meghan, and thank you everyone for joining us for today's episode. If you asked a question that we didn't get a chance to address, or if you have follow-up questions, please feel free to contact Jay or Meghan directly. I have put their email addresses in the chat, so go take a look now. But their email addresses, if you're good at hearing quickly, it's jnachlis@colemaninsights.com and Meghan Campbell@colemaninsights.com. Keep an eye on our website and our social media for information on our next AMA. And if you aren't already, be sure to subscribe for our Tuesdays with Coleman blog on our website. Everyone have a good day. See you next time.